A mysterious note handed by a little girl to a black officer during a routine dinner break sparks a heart-pounding investigation into a chilling secret. How far will he go to protect the vulnerable and stand for justice? Stay tuned to discover how this story unfolds and share where you're watching from today. Officer Cooper, you know what your problem is? You take things way too seriously, Tom said as he sank into the diner booth with a groan. His partner's tone was teasing, but the faint edge of condescension was unmistakable. Brian Cooper glanced up from his menu, suppressing the urge to roll his eyes. It's not a problem to take your job seriously, Tom. Someone's got. The diner bustled around them, a typical evening crowd filling the air with the clatter of plates and the murmur of casual conversation. Ryan had picked this spot a staple in their small town, because it offered something close to peace during their shifts. It was the one place where he could forget, for a moment, the heavy uniform on his back and the weight it carried in a town like theirs. Tom, his sandy-haired partner with a penchant for always being the loudest voice in the room, chuckled. Well, you're the poster boy for serious, Coop. Lighten up. Have a burger or something. It's on me tonight. Ryan forced a smile. If only you extended the same generosity to your paperwork. Their waitress arrived, a cheerful redhead with a pen tucked behind her ear. She greeted them with a familiarity that came from years of serving the same faces. Evening, officers. Usual for you both? Tom grinned. You know me too well, Cindy. Double cheeseburger, extra bacon and fries. Oh, and one of those chocolate milkshakes. And you, Ryan? Cindy asked, her smile warm. Grilled chicken sandwich, no mayo, and water's fine, thanks. Ryan replied. Tom groaned dramatically. Water? Come on, Coop. Live a little. Cindy winked at Ryan as she jotted their orders. Don't let him get to you. Someone's got to stay healthy around here. The conversation turned light as they waited for their food. Tom launched into a story about his weekend fishing trip, embellishing every detail until the table erupted in laughter. Ryan listened, even laughed, but his attention kept drifting. His gaze wandered to the window, scanning the parking lot and the street beyond, a habit he couldn't shake even on the calmest of nights. Earth to Cooper, Tom said, snapping his fingers. I'm telling you about the biggest bass I've ever seen, and you're staring into space. You're killing me here. Ryan smirked. Just keeping an eye out, you know, like we're supposed to. Tom rolled his eyes but didn't push. Their food arrived, and they settled into the kind of easy camaraderie that only came from years of partnership. Then the door opened. Ryan noticed her immediately. The little girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her dark hair was tangled, and her oversized hoodie looked like it belonged to someone much larger. She hesitated just inside the doorway, her small frame almost swallowed by the warm glow of the diner. Her eyes darted around the room before settling on their table. Hey kid, Cindy called out from behind the counter. You lost, sweetie? The girl didn't answer. Instead, she took a hesitant step toward Ryan and Tom's booth. Coop, Tom muttered, lowering his burger. You got a fan or something? Ryan straightened, his senses sharpening. The girl's movements were deliberate but timid, as though each step required every ounce of her courage. When she reached their table, she stopped, staring directly at Ryan with wide brown eyes. Can I help you? Ryan asked gently, leaning forward. The girl didn't speak. She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket and held it out to him. Her hand trembled slightly. Ryan accepted the note, his fingers brushing against the worn paper. What's this? She didn't answer. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder, her expression clouded with fear. Then, without another word, she bolted back out the door and into the night. Tom started, but Ryan was already on his feet. Stay here, Ryan said, heading for the door. Outside, the night had settled into a quiet hum. Ryan scanned the parking lot, but the girl was gone. Frustration knotted his stomach as he turned back inside. Anything? Tom asked when Ryan returned. Ryan shook his head and sat down, the note still clutched in his hand. He unfolded it carefully, the paper soft and frayed at the edges. The handwriting was shaky, written in pencil. "Please help. He's going to hurt me again." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He read them twice, then a third time, hoping somehow the meaning would change. It didn't. "What's it say?" Tom asked, his mouth still half full of fries. Ryan hesitated before passing the note across the table. Tom read it and snorted. "You've got to be kidding me. It's probably some kid playing a prank. Or, I don't know, she's got overprotective parents who freak out about her skipping curfew." Ryan stared at him. "A prank? Tom, this note is a cry for help." Tom shrugged. "It's a scrap of paper from some scared kid. Doesn't mean we need to drop everything. Look, Coop, you're overthinking it." "Thinking it." Ryan's voice rose, drawing a glance from Cindy. He lowered it again, his frustration barely contained. "We're cops, Tom. If a kid says they're in trouble, we don't ignore it." Tom held up his hands in mock surrender. "Fine, fine, do what you gotta do. But don't drag me into it. You know what the captain will say. Leave it to social services or some crap like that." Ryan ignored him. His mind was already racing. The girl's expression, her fear, was burned into his memory. This wasn't a prank. He knew it in his gut. He turned the note over, searching for anything else, but the back was blank. No name, no address, just the desperate plea. "Think Cindy knows her?" Ryan asked, standing up again. "Coop," Tom said, exasperated. "You're really chasing this? You don't even know who she is." "I'll find out," Ryan replied, heading for the counter. Cindy shook her head when Ryan described the girl. "Sorry, hon, I don't recognize her, but, you know, kids come and go with their families. Might be new in town." Ryan nodded, though it wasn't the answer he'd hoped for. As he turned back to their table, his mind churned with possibility. Back at the booth, Tom was scrolling through his phone, clearly uninterested. "So, what's your big plan, Sherlock? Gonna search every house in town?" Ryan ignored the sarcasm. He sat down and pulled out his own phone, snapping a photo of the note. He sent it to a friend at dispatch with a brief explanation, hoping for some lead. Tom sighed. "I'm telling you, Coop, this is a waste of time." "Maybe," Ryan said, pocketing his phone. "But if it's not, that girl's life could be on the line. And I'm not gonna sit here and do nothing." Tom didn't respond, but his expression said it all. Ryan didn't care. His instincts were screaming that this was serious, and he wasn't about to let it slide. As the waitress refilled their coffee, Ryan stared out the window again, his mind fixated on the girl's trembling hand and the words on that fragile piece of paper. "Please help." He didn't know who she was, but he would find her. Ryan couldn't shake the image of the little girl's frightened eyes or the shaky handwriting on the note. As he drove through the dimly lit streets of their small town, he replayed the moment in his mind, searching for clues he might have missed. Tom, sitting in the passenger seat, scrolled aimlessly on his phone, completely uninterested in the investigation. "God, it's late. You're seriously still on this?" Tom asked, breaking the silence. Ryan gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Yeah, I am. That kid's note wasn't a joke, Tom." Tom sighed heavily. "Look, I get it, you care. That's great and all, but this... We don't even know who she is. No name, no address, nothing. What are you gonna do, knock on every door in town?" Ryan didn't answer. He turned onto a quieter street, the rows of modest houses lined with cracked sidewalks and overgrown lawns. His contact at dispatch had gotten back to him with a lead. Apparently a 911 call had been made from a nearby trailer park just a week ago. It had been from a woman who hung up before giving any details. When officers arrived, no one answered the door. Something about it didn't sit right with Ryan. He had to check it out. The trailer park came into view, a small cluster of aging homes, their metal walls dulled by years of wear. It was the kind of place where people kept to themselves, where secrets lingered in the shadows. Ryan parked the cruiser near the entrance and stepped out. Tom stayed in his seat. "You're really doing this? In the middle of the night? Alone?" Ryan leaned back into the car. "I could use your help, you know." Tom shrugged. "This is your rabbit hole, not mine." Ryan shook his head, shutting the door. He clicked on his flashlight and started down the narrow gravel path between the trailers. Most were dark, their occupants likely asleep. A few had lights on, but the blinds were drawn tight. He approached one of the trailers toward the back, the address matching the 911 call. The trailer's porch light flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows. Ryan knocked on the door, his fist echoing against the thin metal. He waited, but there was no response. "Hello? This is Officer Cooper with the town police department," he called out, his voice steady but firm. "I'm just here to check on things." Still no answer. Ryan hesitated before circling around the trailer. A faint sound stopped him in his tracks, like a muffled whimper. He moved closer to the back window, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the dark. The blinds were slightly parted, and he caught a glimpse of movement inside. "Someone in there?" Ryan asked, his heart pounding. Suddenly the door swung open, and a man in his 40s stepped out, glaring at him. He was tall and stocky, his face shadowed under the porch light. "He is sick. What do you want?" the man demanded, his tone aggressive. Ryan stood his ground. "We received a call from this address recently. I just want to make sure everything's okay." The man crossed his arms, blocking the doorway. "That was a mistake. Everything's fine. No need for you to be..." Ryan glanced past him, trying to see inside. "Mind if I come in and take a look, just to be sure?" The man's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I mind. You got a warrant or something?" Ryan's instinct screamed that something wasn't right. He caught a glimpse of a small shoe near the doorframe, pink with a glittery design, the same shoe the little girl had been wearing earlier. Before Ryan could press further, the man stepped forward, forcing him to take a step back. "You're done here, officer." Ryan locked eyes with him, his voice firm. "If there's someone in there who needs help, I'll find out. You can count on them." The man didn't respond. He slammed the door shut, the sound reverberating through the still night. Back at the cruiser, Tom was scrolling through social media, completely unbothered. "How'd it go, Sherlock?" Ryan ignored him, his mind racing. He needed more evidence, something concrete to act on. The next morning, Ryan returned to the station early, diving into the reports on the trailer park. He found a pattern. Multiple calls over the past year, all from anonymous sources reporting screams and loud arguments from the same address. Each time, responding officers left without filing a report. "Coop, what are you doing here this early?" asked Carla, the station clerk, as she set her coffee down at her desk. "Looking into a case," Ryan replied without looking up. "You're always working too hard," she said, shaking her head. "What's so important?" He hesitated before sliding the note across the desk. Carla's expression shifted as she read it. "Oh God, is this from a kid?" Ryan nodded. "I think she's in trouble. The address is from a trailer park on 5th. There's a man there who isn't exactly cooperative." Carla frowned. "Do you want me to pull CPS records?" "Yeah. Anything you can find," Ryan said. An hour later, Carla returned with a file. "Here's what I've got. The girl's name is Ava. She's 8 years old. CPS was involved once, but the case was closed after a month. They didn't find enough evidence to remove her from the home." Ryan flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening as he read. Ava's mother had died 2 years ago, leaving her in the custody of her stepfather, Derek Harlow, the same man who had slammed the door in Ryan's face. That evening, Ryan parked his cruiser a block away from the trailer park and waited. His shift was over, but he couldn't let this go. As the hours passed, he watched the lights in the trailers flicker on and off, tracking Derek's movements through the windows. At 10 p.m., Derek left the trailer and got into his truck, driving off toward the main road. Ryan waited 5 minutes before approaching the trailer again. This time, he didn't knock. He tried the door. It was locked. He moved to the back, finding a window cracked open just enough to slip his fingers up. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of stale beer and unwashed clothes. The living room was cramped and cluttered, but what caught Ryan's attention was a small makeshift bed on the floor, surrounded by scattered crayons and a worn teddy bear. "Alva," Ryan called out softly, moving deeper into the trailer. A muffled sob answered him from a closet. Ryan hurried over and opened it to find Ava curled up, clutching her knees to her chest. Her eyes were red from crying, and her cheeks were streaked with dirt. "It's okay, Ava, you're safe now," Ryan said gently, crouching down to her level. Ava hesitated before throwing her arms around his neck. "He's going to be mad," she whispered. Ryan's heart broke at the fear in her voice. "Not anymore. I promise." As he carried her out of the trailer, headlights suddenly lit up the driveway. Derek's truck roared to a stop and he jumped out, rage etched across his face. "Hey! What the hell are you doing?" Derek shouted, storming toward them. Ryan placed Ava in the back seat of the cruiser before stepping between her and Derek. "You're not laying another hand on her," Ryan said, his voice cold and steady. Derek lunged, but Ryan was ready. He blocked the attack, pinning Derek against the side of the cruiser. "You're under arrest for child endangerment," Ryan said as he cuffed him. Ava watched from the back seat, her wide eyes filled with the relief for the first time. Ryan caught her gaze in the rearview mirror as he drove to the station, a small but hopeful smile tugging at her lips. In that moment, Ryan knew he'd made the right choice, no matter the cost. The station was quiet as Ryan walked Ava inside, her small hand gripping his tightly. She hadn't spoken much since the arrest, but her tear-streaked face had softened into an expression of tentative relief. Carla, seated at her desk, looked up in surprise. "Coop, what's going on?" she asked, rising from her chair. Ryan glanced at Ava and then back at Carla. "I need you to call CPS. She can't go back to that trailer." Carla nodded, her expression serious. "Give me a second." She picked up the phone, and her voice turned professional as she relayed the urgency of the situation. Ryan knelt down to Ava's level, offering her a small smile. "Ava, you're safe now. No one's going to hurt you again." Ava hesitated before nodding. "Are you sure?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm sure," Ryan said firmly. "And I'll make sure you have someone who can take care of you." Carla returned, placing a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "They're sending someone over. Shouldn't take long." Ryan led Ava to the small break room, where he offered her a bottle of water and a granola bar. She accepted them cautiously, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. "What's going to happen to me?" Ava finally asked, her voice trembling. Ryan sat across from her, his tone calm and reassuring. "There are people who will help you. They'll find a safe place for you to stay. You won't have to go back to Derek." Ava didn't respond right away. She picked at the label on the water bottle, her brow furrowed. "Do you think my mom would be proud of me?" Guy's chest tightened. He leaned forward, his voice soft. "I think your mom would be very proud. You were so brave, Ava. You asked for help when you needed it most. That takes a lot of courage." Ava nodded, a hint of a smile appearing on her lips. Later that evening, Ryan watched from the lobby as a CPS caseworker arrived to take Ava. The woman, a kind-looking middle-aged lady, knelt to greet Ava with a warm smile. "Hi, Ava, my name's Sandra. I'm here to make sure you're safe and cared for, okay?" Ava glanced back at Ryan, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. He gave her an encouraging nod. "It's okay, Ava. Sandra's here to help." Ava hesitated, then slowly reached out to take Sandra's hand. As they walked toward the door, Ava turned back one last time. "Thank you, Officer Cooper," she said, her voice steady despite its smallness. Ryan smiled. "Take care of yourself, Ava." When the door closed behind them, Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The weight of the night began to settle on him. He had done the right thing, but there was still work to be done. The next day, Ryan sat in the captain's office recounting the events in detail. Captain Morris, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper sense of justice, listened intently. "You went in without backup," she said flatly when he finished. Ryan nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I didn't have time to wait. She needed help." Morris leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Had you arrested Derek Harlow without a warrant?" "I had probable cause," Ryan replied firmly. "The evidence was clear, and the girl was in immediate danger." Morris studied him for a long moment before nodding. "I don't like how you handled it, but I can't argue with the outcome. We'll make sure Harlow faces the full weight of the law." Relief washed over Ryan, but Morris wasn't finished. "As for the department, we'll need to address why those earlier calls to that trailer went unanswered. I suspect there's more going on here than just negligence." Ryan nodded. "Thank you, Captain." As he left her office, Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. He had stood his ground, and now there was a chance to root out deeper issues within the department. That evening, Ryan sat in the cruiser with Tom, who had begrudgingly agreed to join him on patrol. The silence between them was thick, the tension palpable. "You gonna ignore me all night?" Tom finally asked. Ryan glanced at him. "You didn't back me up, Tom. You sat in the car while I went in alone." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't think it was worth it. You know how many false alarms we deal with." "This wasn't a false alarm," Ryan shot back. "That little girl could have been killed if we'd done nothing." Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, Coop, I get it now, okay? You were right. I didn't see it at the time, but you did. That's why you're good at this." Ryan didn't respond immediately. He stared out at the darkened streets, the memories of Ava's fear etched into his mind. You can't pick and choose who to protect, Tom. If someone needs help, it's our job to step up. No excuses. Tom nodded slowly. "You're right, I screwed up, I'm sorry." Ryan glanced at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "It's not me you owe an apology to." "I know," Tom said quietly. "But I'll do better. You have my word." Ryan gave a small nod, his respect for Tom cautiously restored. In the following weeks, Ava's story became the catalyst for a larger investigation. The department uncovered a network of corruption that had allowed cases like hers to fall through the cracks. Several officers were disciplined, and new protocols were implemented to ensure better responses to calls. Ryan found himself at the center of the changes, his determination inspiring others on the force. Even Tom, once dismissive and jaded, began to approach their work with a renewed sense of purpose. One evening, Ryan received an envelope at the station. Inside was a drawing. A stick figure of a little girl holding hands with a police officer. Below it, in Ava's shaky handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for saving me." Ryan smiled, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. He pinned the drawing to the bulletin board in his office, a reminder of why he had chosen this path. As he headed out for his shift, he paused to glance at the drawing one more time. Ava's courage had changed everything, not just for her, but for him and the entire department. The night was quiet as Ryan slid into his cruiser, the radio crackling softly in the background. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hope.